This happened 30, 30 years ago when I was 21 years of age. My name's Dean Hales. At the time, I was working as a full-time paramedic for a hospital. I was unmarried, no kids. Um, I was a supervisor for a pediatric trauma flight team. So I had plenty of medical knowledge and knew exactly what was going on once this condition came upon me that I was born with at 21. Um, Prior to growing up, while I was being raised as a young kid, I was brought up by my parents, who are still alive today, and I had a great upbringing by my grandparents. And through the death of my grandparents at the time, I had reservations on if there was a God, um, due to how drastically my grandparents died and the conditions that they faced going through their lives with cancer. They were taken violently by cancer, Alzheimer's, uh, heart disease. So I had basically super mentors raising me that I couldn't understand if there was God, how such good people could suffer. So I uh, really had a disbelief in God at the time. But I happened to be working New Year's Eve. I and once again I was 21. I'm now 54 years of age, um, and I was working in the emergency room of a Cleveland area hospital, and I went to bend over to pick up a pillow that fell off one of the ER beds, and I happened to stand back up from bending over, and I got this brief second feeling of dizziness and my heart racing through my chest. And I would work 24 hours and be off 48 hours is how I was scheduled. And after experiencing this dizziness and this rapid heart rate, I had this feeling of my heart racing through my chest for nearly about 30 minutes. And no chest pain, no shortness of breath, nothing like this or that. But I decided to hook myself up to one of the heart monitors in the emergency room, and I about crapped my pants when I seen how fast my heart rate was going. Um, I was later diagnosed with what it's called supraventricular tachycardia, which is just a uh, fancy name for saying super heart rate, super fast heart rate. And lo and behold, my heart at the time I hooked myself up to the heart monitor was doing 860 beats a minute. Normal heart rate 60 to 100, so I was doing like 8 people's heart rates at one time. So I ran off a rhythm strip and gave it to my best friend, who happened to be the ER doctor, and he about crapped when he found out it was me that the strip was on, and he did a full workup on me, and basically at the time they felt it was brought on by caffeine, because I was just loading myself up with caffeine, energy drinks, just anything you could think of to keep myself going on a 24-hour shift. So they ended up doing like vagal maneuvers, and then they gave me adenosine, which is a cardiac med that causes you almost, well, it actually causes you to flatline electrically on the heart monitor, and I got to witness that, and that was a shock to myself. But you just don't have any really side effects other than what I experienced was like a light switch being shut off and me going back into a normal heart rate. So I was sent home, and after about 2 weeks, um, I'm not having the rhythm again. I started getting this bad supraventricular tachycardia, tachycardia with the heart rate in the 800s again, back to back to back. And I went to the emergency room once again, and they referred me to this cardiologist out of the one hospital in the area. And I went to the cardiologist, and once again, I was only the age of 21, no previous heart conditions, no pre uh, medical history whatsoever. And met with this cardiologist, and he told me that, Dean, you have two options. You can either go on this medication, which is quite dangerous with the side effects, or I can do this surgery, which is with laser tip catheters, which is cardiac ablation surgery, where I go in and burn this heart tissue out with this laser tip catheter. Well, I'm 21 at the time, and once again, working in the medical field, I opted, because I wasn't having what I felt a whole lot of episodes of this rhythm. So I first decided to go on the medication, and just felt like shit. And went back to the cardiologist like a week later, and said, let's do this surgery. So he did the pre-emission testing. Nothing significant other than he put me on a Holter monitor, where um, he discovered that I could feel myself going into this rhythm several seconds prior to it showing up on the heart monitor. So he had some bad news prior to having the surgery for me, that I needed to be fully consciously awake to be able to explain to him that I was going into this lethal arrhythmia. So I go home from the appointment, and it was like, because of availability, I was like going in like a week later from all these pre-mission testing. And the night before my surgery, I had almost like a premonition that I was going to die. And I spoke to my parents. I was living at home at the time yet, from coming home from college. And I basically told them that if something should happen, that I'd die, I'd love them, and this and that. And so they thought I was sort of being crazy, because it was supposed to be outpatient surgery. That cardiologist told me it was like a in and out thing, and with me being not even put unconscious, it was going to be even quicker. And so I get up the next morning, and my surgery is supposed to be maximum of 2 hours, if that. And I had how simple the surgery was. It was a 1 to 3% chance of any complications from the surgery, and I would be basically nuisance free of this bad arrhythmia. So I get into the operating room, and he straps me down onto the table, and they start hooking me up with all kinds of different medical devices, the heart monitor, uh, deep fib patches on my chest and stomach, because they had to come up through my groin with the casts. And he basically started in on a procedure, and I had all these TV monitors that I was actually able to witness the interior of my heart, which I found was quite very interesting. Being a paramedic myself, I love cardiology, and just wasn't not experiencing any pain till he told me he was ready to burn me with this laser. And once he burnt me with the laser, it felt like two semi trucks hitting me from both sides of my body. And it was just excruciating, but I was basically paralyzed from the neck down. So it was like you had no physical way of getting away or shutting your mind off to this pain. So about after three, I ended up getting burnt 4 times total with the laser. But on the third time, I had to ask him to give me a break because I was just like felt like raw on the inside, and told him, I said, "Am I stable enough to take a break?" And because he had told me I had to get burnt this fourth time, and this fourth time was a pretty critical uh, spot in my heart. It was close to my AV node, and your heart top portion of your heart runs off of the AV node, or I believe it does. I've been out of medical so long I cannot remember the AV node from the SA node, which one controls what portion of the heart. All right, and but anyway, um, I call him back to burn me this fourth time with the laser, and he told me, "Dean, you need to try to remain as calm as you can because of this being so close to your AV node. Um, I could possibly destroy it, and this and that." So he burns me with the laser on the fourth time, and I code on the table. I black out, and from there, I remember floating above my body and just witnessing just total chaos taking place in this operating room. Um, I remember the doctor screaming at the nurse for the crash cart, and them immediately start doing CPR on me and giving me ventilations and all that to resuscitate me. Um, from there, I remember floating down the hospital floor to the waiting room and witnessing my family in the operating, or I'm sorry, in the waiting room, and witness them in an argument because they felt like at the time I was in a relationship, this one girlfriend they felt had pressured me into having the surgery, which wasn't the case at all. And I basically then went back up to my body and witnessed them still working on my body. And then I went into this tunnel, and I remember it just being this total darkness that overtook me, and yet I felt like there was something drawing me. And I remember putting my hand up to my face and pinching my arm, and just having full mobility in my body, but just not knowing any any type of direction or whereabouts where I was. But at the same time, I felt like something was drawing me, and I started walking, and I came to this point where the white light that everybody talks about hits you, and I remember putting my hand up to my face and walking through the white light, and I came face to face with my deceased grandparents. At that point, I uh, I broke down in tears. Because at that point, I knew exactly where I was, and of course, they told me they loved them loved me and I loved them, and that there was things I needed to see. They told me. And from there, I remember just being at total peace. Um, didn't see any buildings or masses of people or anything, but just total paradise. Um, but at the same time, I was getting a fast forward in my future. I came up to love of my life. She was surrounded by kids, and I remember this little girl running up to me and steps on my one foot, my left foot, with both of her feet, wrapping her arms around my leg and looking up at me and saying, "I love you, Daddy." And of course, where I am at, I acknowledged it. So I love you too. And yet, at this point in my life, being 21, I'm not married, no kids. I'm just enjoying life to the fullest at this time. So from there, I seen worldly events, 9/11, um, nuclear war. I seen just total chaos, things I wish I never ever witnessed, of course. And I didn't want before God Himself. And once again, I'm at this total peace. But when I approached Him, I fell to my knees and I begged Him. He basically told me it wasn't my time to be here. And I had a choice and path to choose. And I remember falling to my knees at that point, begging Him to allow me to stay in heaven where I was. Um, I remember crying like I never cried before, and begging Him that please allow me to stay. And I reached out, touched His foot, and when I touched His foot, I woke up in my body. Um, I remember looking over my shoulder, and I'm I'm like in the recovery room of the hospital, and they had all kinds of medication. They had like 4 IV pumps on me and all this crap. And I wasn't intubated or anything like that at the time, because I had found out they had pronounced me dead for over 2 hours. And I remember when I first came to, looking up on my shoulder and seeing my heart go from a rate of 12 to like 60, like the snap of a finger. And my mom and my dad and my family were in this recovery room, or I don't know what type of room it was, but hospital room. And then they were basically there to say their goodbyes and just look over me because of the fact that they were going to donate my organs. And I had came to, and at this point, I hadn't said a word, but my mom was at the foot of my bed and she was tapping her hand over my toes, and I like was bruised from like head to foot from the surgery and just being manipulated and everything else that happened in the surgery room. And every time my mom was tapping her hand over my foot, it would just shoot pain up into my groin where they went in with the catheters on both sides of my groin. But first words out of my mouth were, "God damn it, Mom, will you stop doing that?" And when I said that, everybody in the recovery room started screaming because here, not knowing to myself that I was dead. And so when everybody and heard everybody screaming, they came in, including the cardiologist, and they do a double take because here I'm fully awake, cussing everybody out. And I had the family had to be ushered out, and the doctor came up to me, and I asked him, I was like, "What the hell happened?" And I'm thinking like surgery went completely fine, because it felt like I was just gone like 15 minutes. Well, this was like close to 5, 6 hours later that I'm discovering all this information. And he basically tells me, Dean, you were gone, and you've been gone for quite some time, and you're you're a miracle. And I didn't say a word, just pissed me off. And when he approached me, I sort of grabbed a hold of him and sort of chewed him a new ass, saying that he basically should never talk to a woman like he did. And if he was in charge of the surgery, he should be prepared for the worst case scenario. And I basically chewed him a new ass. So during this, he's like in shock because he's telling me that, Dean, you were fully in code, which basically they were doing CPR on me and resuscitating me at the time he's like chewing this nurse out. And he asked me point blank, like, how did how did you know this took place? And I said, I knew. And I kept on telling him that I know more than you know what took place with my body. And he looked at me funny and asked me this question. He goes, I got a few questions. And I said, sure. Goes in the surgery room. There's a unique feature in the surgery room, and this one corner of the wall. Can you describe that to me? And I said, sure. I said, are you talking about the wallpaper border or top of the supply cabinet of the circus train with clowns hanging off the caboose? And and he goes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And he goes, I go, do you need to know the color of the balloons of the clowns in each hand? Because I said, I can tell you. And I said, there's this old steam locomotive, the clowns hanging out of the one window. There's a tiger in the one cage car, and then an old-fashioned caboose with two clowns hanging off the back, each with three balloons in each of their hand. He goes, you're a miracle. Um, they then sent me immediately for all kinds of tests. They found no brain damage. Um, they couldn't explain why I'm here to this day. Um, so very next day they discharged me. Um, they had no answers at that point. Um, so went home. Still had not talked to anybody about what I had went through. I was still in a little disbelief myself. I requested my medical records, got them, wanted to make sure it wasn't drug induced hallucinations, of course, brain damage. Nothing was coming back. The only thing they had gave me was epinephrine, uh, can't think of the other drug, unfortunately, but it was basically all cardiac related. Atropine was the other drug I just remembered, basically just to try to get my heart going. And then, of course, defibrillation for shocking the heart, and that stuff was done to me. Um, but no, nothing that could have chemically induced any of these hallucinations or any anything that could produce what I experienced. But yet, like I said, going back to my grandparents not believing, I still questioned it, and it just bugged the hell out of me. And I started researching it, and started reaching out to other people, and spoke to my friends and about it, and asked them, it's like, am I crazy or this and that, or have experienced this, or have I changed? None of them thought that they would start crying, and it still bugged me. And it's like, why was I given this information? What am I supposed to do with this information? Um, and so I was living out in the city of Lorain, Ohio, and had to go to the grocery store this one day, and I would always drive by this old 200-year-old church, and I would always tease me and my dad would always tease my mom, and any member of my family would tease about this, that if I walked into church, that I would probably self-combust because I'd never went to church ever. And or if I did, it would be for a funeral or a wedding, of course. But for me to attend church, it's out of the rarity, um, or it's very rare, I should say. So this one day I'm driving, and I don't know what it was about this old church, but it just kept on uh, jumping out at me. And went past it, going to this grocery store, and came back past it going home. And second time out, I drove by it, and it's not a Sunday or any day where the services are taking place or anything like that. And I don't know what it was, but next thing I know, I'm pulling into this church parking lot, and I'm walking into this church. And if I get emotional on this, I apologize. Um, I start walking down the main aisle of the church. And as I'm walking down the aisle, I see this male figure coming across the front altar. And as I get closer to this male figure, the more and more it looks like my grandfather that raised me. And once I start noticing this, I start profusely crying again. And to the point I can't stand, to the point I have to sit down in the pew. And I've never stepped foot in this church a day in my life. And I basically am approached by this figure, and they call me by name. And I'm at this point, I'm seeing my grandfather basically walking up to me and calling me by name, and I'm just got my head down, bawling my eyes out, and I say, I can't handle why I was given this information, and I don't know why God wanted me to have this information or what to do with this information. And I just spilled my guts. Um, my grandfather's name was Joe, and I'm I'm considering myself non-denominational at this point. Um, but this father of this church, his name was Joe as well, and he basically tells me, he goes, I've been in charge of this church and been in this line of work for basically all my life, and you would think after 65 years of being a religious man like I've been all my life that there'd be no person closer to God than me. And he goes, but Dean, you got me beat. He goes, God wanted to give you a gift, and he gave you definitely a gift, and he just wants you to believe in him. And exactly when he said that, it was like a light switch going off in my brain, and all the worries of knowledge and everything disappeared out of me, and it was like I said, like a light switch going off. Um, I left there feeling at peace, and by no means did I become a Bible preacher or a regular churchgoer by any means, and to this day I'm not. Um, I definitely believe in God. Prior to it, like I said, I didn't. Um, I wanted proof, and God gave me a cold slap in the face. Um, Things I've seen from that near-death experience just reinforces things. Um, every time, I'll tell you, once I had my first daughter, I was still working as a paramedic because I was a medic for close to 15 years. And I remember my my daughter was basically first time I ever seen her walk. I remember coming home from work and coming to the side door, and out of nowhere, my daughter comes running to my surprise, steps on my left foot, looks up at me, and says, I love you, Daddy. And I don't know if everybody remembers me telling you that when that took place in heaven, but it was like a lightning rod hitting me, and it was like goosebumps overtook me. Um, and I accepted it as a gift of God and proof that He does exist. have nothing more to say, my friend.